event that saw Charles Oliveira get that first defense of his UFC lightweight title with a submission win over Dustin Poirier, 1 minute 2 seconds of round number 3. We said it going in, Dominic. We felt like the champion was being a bit overlooked in this matchup, but also understanding. I wasn't even talking about the odds. I feel like the odds were actually kind of fair. Obviously, the fight took place and Charles won, and he was the underdog, at closing. But you look at Dustin's resume and the names he's beaten. No matter what win streak Charles is on, it's hard to compare the two.
Right.
But then once the fight took place, I think the story here, Dominic, was while Dustin definitely got the better of this fight early and often, round 1 was definitely his. And if a lot of people might have even expected that we were sort of, maybe Charles looked like he might be starting to fade a little bit. Maybe a finish would be coming in round 2 or 3. But I think the story ended up being that while Dustin was exceptional early in this fight, I think the diverse skill set of Charles Oliveira, the more well-rounded fighter here, I think ultimately used all of his weapons to get a win. He hurt. I would argue he was winning a few of those exchanges on the feet. He obviously took the fight to the ground and would hold top control, landing some nasty elbows, and then ultimately got the back and got the finish with the submission. So I want to get your thoughts on this fight before we kind of move into anything else. Did the fight go how you kind of thought, or was there anything that surprised you or disappointed you about Charles or Dustin here?
Fight was incredible. It was everything that you could have wanted. We were so excited it was the 2 clear-cut best lightweights in the world, and that's what the fight was. That's what it looked like. The first round was absolutely amazing. While Dustin did win and landed very big shots that I was surprised that Charles was able to take that many, because it felt like Charles would land good. He did kind of stun Dustin one time. I don't know if many people picked up on it, but it did happen. Just kind of, you got to shake it off, one of those. But every shot Dustin hit Charles with, his head was getting snapped back. He was wobbling. His eyes got big. He would fall back to the cage. But then he would find a way to clinch up. He'd land nasty knees to the body. He'd throw elbows. He was doing a really good front teep kick to the body. So he was, him going to the body surprised me a lot in this one. And I don't know if it ultimately played a huge factor, because going into round 2, a lot of people were questioning, why is Dustin content with kind of just holding guard? Because Charles was on top for 3.5, 4 minutes, something like that in the second round. Landed the elbows, as Noah said, just really controlled him. As close to 10-8 you can get. I would have been curious to see what the judges would have scored it, but we didn't.
Two of the three scored it a 10-8.
Oh, okay, cool. So it was a very great round for Charles, but I was one where I thought Dustin was more so, and he even said this in the post-fight, content with, okay, I don't want to get stuck in a weird position, because you don't want to be down there on the ground with Charles rolling around and getting slick. So he was content with losing a round as long as he was minimizing the damage. And while he did take some big elbows, he still was able to stay clear. He didn't get cut, which I don't know how he didn't get cut open. So then we went into round 3, but we're talking in a blink of an eye, Charles was on Dustin's back within the first 10 seconds probably of the round. And as soon as that happened, as much as I love Dustin, and I do love Charles, so it did help in this fight, I knew it was over. As soon as he got on his back, he was right. They still weren't that slippery. He was in a perfect position. He wasn't too high. He locked in the body triangle. And it was just a matter of getting his hands positioned. And he's so good. He's such an ace at jiu-jitsu. You knew it was just a matter of time before he locked it in. Gets the rear naked choke. Gets the first title defense. Overcame adversity, Noah, in the first round. The narrative that we called bullshit on Friday carries over into the Monday recap episode. This man is the furthest thing from a quitter. He is the undisputed champion, the best lightweight in the world, Du Bronx, Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, this was a huge fight for his legacy and for really it's going to be big for him moving forward for sure, because I want to believe that everybody's going to start to give him the respect he deserves now.
I hope so.
I'm not saying just because someone, if you out there, if you're listening or watching, if you pick Dustin Poirier to win this fight, I mean, that's perfectly acceptable. I'm not saying that you were overlooking Charles because you thought Dustin would win. I thought this fight was about as close to a 50-50 fight as you could get.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of played as such. I mean, both guys had big moments. And as we thought, their style kind of clashing led me to believe we weren't going to go 5 rounds. And it
Yep.
didn't go 5 rounds. Now, for Charles, this is very interesting because I had been kind of under this impression that for Charles Oliveira and his title reign, the matchups that I thought would give him the most trouble, if I was looking kind of into the immediate future, the aftermath of his win against Michael Chandler, I thought it would be those heavy hitters, those good strikers of the lightweight division. So off the top, Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, two guys that hit hard, they hit with very big precision,
Yep.
and they throw often, and they'll pressure them, they'll pressure their opponents and whatnot. And I thought that, for considering that at the time, this is after UFC 262, Dustin and Justin weren't clearly 1-2 yet, but I mean, they both ended up having fights booked that would determine if they were the next in line. And now that that's the case, I would have assumed that, man, this is going to be the toughest part of his reign, is getting past Dustin and then Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
But now I'm starting to think that, even though it's still a concern for me that Oliveira really doesn't move his head, he pretty much leaves his head right there, and it is just kind of a target for a guy that throws with the precision and the kind of
Yeah.
boxing that Dustin possesses. I mean, he was lighting him up when he could, but he just withstood all of it. A very high IQ performance.
Yes.
Always clinching up, because really he was almost like leaving his head there as like bait. I'm not saying that that's what he did, but like he would get Dustin to throw a left hand or a straight right at his head, and it would land. But then Dustin doing that would overextend, and then Charles would just grab him by the back of his neck, throw some nasty knees to the body, and then, clinch him up, look to try to drag him to the ground.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting performance, not something that I can say I've seen from Charles or anybody else really of note recently. So, with that being said, I'm almost wondering now if, the Beneil Dariush's and the Islam Makhachevs are truly going to be the biggest test for Charles Oliveira on his title run, because those matchups, those guys that will take him to the ground and will really test him. We thought his jiu-jitsu and him being on his back, how dangerous he is, that might be enough to be really the equalizer against guys like that. But
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, right now he's at a great place in his career. He's in his prime. He's looking better and better each time out. But Dominic, as I mentioned, he does have an opponent that it looks like he'll be fighting next, and that is Justin Gaethje. Early thoughts on that potential matchup?
Copy and paste. I mean, no, Justin and Dustin are super powerful and great strikers, but in different ways. They strike so much differently. And what I'm curious to see will play a factor is we talked about how good Justin Gaethje's uppercut was against Michael Chandler. So I want to see how that can be implemented against a guy like Charles, who will change levels. Because if he comes in on a level change and catches one of them, if he eats that dude needs to check for a titanium jaw. So I think that's a very intriguing fight. We've obviously seen Justin be submitted by Habib when they fought for the title, and I know Habib and Charles are completely different, and damn, I can't say that fight doesn't intrigue me even more now, but we'll never get it, so it's fine. But Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, again, clear-cut top two guys now that Dustin's out of the way. Justin's next up. Then after that, you got Beneil fighting Islam, the winner of that. I mean, everything's really shaping up here in the top of this division. I'd say late spring, early summer, we're going to see those two clash. And man, it's going to be fun. What Justin can present that Dustin really didn't in this fight is those nasty calf kicks. And he didn't use them much against Michael Chandler, which was surprising, but the damn uppercut he was using so much. So those are kind of the two things to look out for me. Obviously, we'll see if Gaethje's takedown defense can hold up. We don't get to see Gaethje tested much in the clinch, so that could be an interesting factor. I mean, I can't tell you how excited I am for those two to face off because they're just, again, so different. So yeah, Charles Oliveira, nothing's going to get easier for him, but if he keeps rallying off these wins, this dude's already at the top of the mountain, but he can really legitimize himself as maybe one of the best by the time it's all said and done. 32 years old, people. 32 years old.
Yeah, it's weird because you see the potential right now for that legacy to just keep building.
Mm-hmm.
Because after that win, you're like, man, this guy could really make a run here at this division. But it's not going to come easy. Every
No.
time out there, he's going to have to answer a question about his skill set, about something from his past. Like there's always going to be something that his opponent is going to have as an advantage over him.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the lightweight division is still the premier division inside of the UFC. Is that's only going to continue. Let's say Charles were to go on this immaculate run where he beats Justin Gaethje, he beats Islam Makhachev, Beneil Dariush. Well, you got guys like Rafael Fiziev coming up.
Yeah.
You know, these guys, Brad Riddell, guys that are going to continue to improve over the next couple of years. And by the time they're ready to fight for a title, they're going to be absolute killers as well. Younger, probably faster. I mean, it's never going to get easier. But I think Charles got a good head on his shoulders for it. You can tell he loves being the champion. The look of it. He wears the shades. He rocks the suit. I mean, the guy just has fully embellished himself into being the champion that he knew he always could be. And it's been one of those stories this year that has been probably my favorite to watch unfold and get to see live. We were texting a little bit last night in our group chat, and one of our buddies said after Cody Garbrandt lost, we'll talk about it a little bit. He said, "Man, I wish I didn't get attached to some of these fighters." And because I had told you before that I had kind of felt like I had gotten to that point where I stopped kind of having a dog in the fight and could just watch for purely wanting a good fight. And I said, like, yeah, it's a good feeling when you get there. But then once again, Dominic, just like I did in your basement for UFC 262, even though I love Dustin Poirier, when Charles got that submission on and he tapped, I started screaming, I started yelling, I started pumping my fist. Charles Oliveira has done something to me. It's something. It feels good to see the potential in someone. Obviously, people saw the potential before me, but I'm just saying. Well, especially like since we've been doing this podcast, I've really felt like I've been in his corner.
Yeah.
And then you see where he's taken it, and it's just like it's like that's my guy. It just feels good sometimes.
Well, it's something about that journey, right, man? I mean, from the favelas of Brazil, came from nothing, and now he's opening up gyms. He's donating to charities. He's giving meals to people in Brazil. And now, also, by the way, tied Donald Cerrone for 18 performance bonuses, the most in UFC history. He's so humble and so respectful, true martial artist. I think that's why he's tickling your fancy. It's hard not to. He's a special guy, special fighter.
Yeah, he became the 9th UFC fighter to win 20 fights inside of the octagon with that win on Saturday. And now let's talk a little bit about the loser, Dustin Poirier. First off, big shout out to him. He's donating $20,000 to some sort of charity that is in
Charles' choosing.
Yeah, Charles' hometown. So what a class act that guy is. The first thing that he thinks about after getting choked out is how he can help his opponent. I mean, that's just shows the kind of character you're dealing with. But this is a tough loss. I mean, he's one of the best fighters of all time to have never won the undisputed title. That's clear. And once again, he came up short. It was a great fight. He had his moments more so than he did in his first chance against Habib. This was definitely a better showing from him. But he didn't win. So now you find himself in this position where we've already been speculating on how much longer Dustin has, in MMA. And I don't really know where that comes from because every time he talks about it, he seems to not be all that.
Yeah.
All that. It doesn't sound like a guy who's got one foot out the door. It just sounds like a guy who recognizes his place in the sport where he's been fighting a long time. He wants to get paid to he feels like he's at a high level where he deserves the big pay, but also doesn't want to fight as frequently in order to extend that career as much as he can.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really come off like a guy who's ready to quit. And the post-fight interview, a part of me in my head's like, is he going to retire? And I think I just think that every time someone loses at this point, I'm just like,
Yeah.
are they going to retire? But he didn't. And obviously he was gutted. But now there's a big question on kind of what's next for him. A lot of people really thought he was going to win the title. And I'm not just
Yeah.
saying like they thought he was going to win, but I mean, some people basically had thought it was a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the storybook ending, I mean, this is the guy that said 25 minutes to make life fair.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't really shows that this isn't a movie,
Yeah.
So for Dustin, what is next for him in your eyes?
So I did think it was interesting in the post-fight presser. I'll try to get as quote unquote close to what he said as I can, but they did basically say, "What do you think is next?" And obviously, he's going to go home and be with his family, the holidays, all that stuff. They always say that. But then he goes, I have no doubt in my mind that if I put my mind to it, 2 or 3 more wins, and I will and can fight for a title again. But then he goes, but do I want to go through all that again? Do I want to have these 2 or 3 fights against the best in the world just to get back to a title shot again? So that was what I took away the most. And I still can't help but, bring into the account that he's interested in 170 pounds. And there's a guy that has been wanting to fight him, that they've been scheduled to fight before, that has never happened. And if Dustin doesn't feel the need to go through all that grueling stuff again to try and get another title fight, if he's content with that, because he said regardless, win or lose, none of what he'd done prior to this was in vain, which I respect a lot because he really loves his journey that he's had. I could see him trying to get another big payday, maybe one last big payday. Again, we don't know about the retirement thing, but I think a 170-pound bout with Mr. Nathan Diaz, who just so happens to have 1 fight left on his UFC contract, would make a lot of sense. It's a fight that a lot of people would love. It's one that is a fun fight that you could still do a 5-rounder for. It's a big payday for both guys. There's not necessarily title implications on the line, but at the same time, it's still massive in terms of like their careers, this latter portion of their careers. And it's just one that just kind of, I don't know, 2 guys are just going to go in there, slug it out. They've done it all. There's nothing else for them to do other than a belt. And if they're not wanting to pursue that anymore, why not square them up against one another? I know we talked about this before the fight, Noah. Curious to see how you feel now that the fight is in the past.
Yeah, there's only a couple real options that seem very viable. And who knows when he's going to fight again. He's already made it clear he doesn't want to be as active. You probably won't see him till towards the end of summer, maybe, or sometime in the summer. Just that's the reality. So if you're looking at that timeline, is that too long of a time off? I mean, is the timeline really add up for him and Nate Diaz to meet? Because I can't help but feel like with Nate Diaz, like I don't know what's going on, but something's got to give.
Yeah.
Either he's going to accept the fight here soon, or the UFC is going to cave and give him an opponent that he wants or something. I don't know. But I can't help but feel like Nate Diaz is going to fight before the summer.
Yeah.
So then there's only a couple other options. And the 170-pound thing is still very interesting because I could still see him just kind of doing it, just being like, not even really trying to make a run, but just trying to have a few fights there, not have to cut weight.
Yeah.
I do think there's a chance you get a 4th Conor McGregor fight.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that should be Conor's comeback fight? No. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I understand the 3rd one ended controversially, but I just think that those last 2 fights prove that right now Dustin is, in my opinion, has the edge over Conor McGregor.
I agree.
So Conor needs to fight someone else, try to get back, get better. Coming off a terrible injury, don't think you should do that fight off the bat. So really, Dominic, the only other viable option is for him to do what he doesn't know if he wants to do right now, and that's to continue making that run at 155 pounds, and that's going to start probably with Michael Chandler.
Yeah.
A fight with Michael Chandler in the summer would probably make a lot of sense. Two guys right there in the top of the division. Um, I think there's some other outlier options because the division's going to move so much from now till then. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe he would get the loser of the Islam Beneil fight, depending on what kind of fight that ends up being.
Mm-hmm.
There's some definite options for him, but it just seems like he's kind of reached this point where there's only so much you can
Yeah.
do with him, because he's hit a certain level where he's elevated himself to a certain point
Yep.
where you got to make these very specific matchups for him. And Michael Chandler would. I mean, that's a great fight. It's a
Oh,
great fight.
100%. Yeah.